All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Chris, Infinite Realities, and I am joined by one of my all-time favorite writers of all time, Mr. Mark Waid. How are you, sir?
Good, sir. That's very kind of you to say. Welcome to the end times.
Welcome to the end times. It turns out a little bit more boring than we thought it would be.
I really thought, the end times would be a lot of people running up and down the street, screaming things on fire, cars are erupting. No, it's just people wanting to get to the mall. That's all.
Yeah,
and
that's what it is.
Upset.
Yeah. Instead of defending the mall, we're trying to get to the gap.
Yeah, I've seen your governor try to put on a mask. That was the highlight of my day.
I'm glad he did it for cameras.
Oh, sideways was the best. I mean, that was the best. He put it on sideways. That was the greatest. So anyway, I don't want to get too much into that because I don't want to alienate.
How have you been holding up? You been doing okay?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, as a freelancer, I worked at home for 30 years. This is not much of a change. Instead of leaving the house once every 3 days, I leave it like once a week. So that's about it. I've been lucky. Nobody in my family, none of my friends been hit by it. My girlfriend's place is 4 blocks away. So really, so she can shuttle over there when we both need a little bit of breathing room. And it's been fine. I've just been caught up on Better Call Saul and better caught up on Too Hot to Handle. So I'm good.
Nice. I think my partner, Jamie, she does a 90-Day Fiancé. That's her binge poison of choice.
That'll be my next. Yep. I found one called Feel Good the other day on Netflix. 6 episodes, 30 minutes. So yes. And it's very much if you saw Fleabag or anybody out there saw Fleabag, it's very reminiscent of Fleabag. So very cute, a little dark, but I like that. Anyway.
Well, are you able to work on anything right now? I know a lot of creators got the pencils down notification.
Right. Well, we did at Marvel as well, but the good news is that's really kind of my part-time job at this point because as publisher of Humanoids, the good news is we are able to ride this out. We've got enough capital and enough, enough history and enough, just enough substance to us where we're not having to furlough anybody. We don't have to shut anybody down or tell anybody to drop their pencils. So that's been business as usual there, just over Zoom. So I'm on my iPad about half the day. So there's that. And so, I got to tell you, I've never felt luckier to have taken a leap from periodicals to a graphic novel publisher than I do right now.
I imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got to be so rough on you and other stores. You don't know your cash flow. You don't know exactly, what you ordered 2 months ago from Diamond. Can you sell it 2 weeks from now when it comes in? You don't know.
Well, I know that when I put together my next business plan to factor pandemic into it.
Oh, yeah. I took the job, the 1st of March. First day of March, our assistant editor quit because she was going across country and hadn't given notice. So she gave notice that day. Second day, the tornadoes in Tennessee that hit Tennessee, wiped out a quarter of our backstock. So in a truck, the driver survived. That's good.
Good.
And so at that point, I sat down with my staff and I said, in the most amazing act of hubris since Icarus, I said, listen, I've been at this for over 30 years. I've done every job there is to do in comics. I've seen everything. There's no problem that can't be solved if we just figure out how to do it. We're all smart people. In fact, I kind of look forward to when you bring me a problem that I've never seen before.
Sure.
And so God heard that as a challenge. And then week 2, pandemic. So, yeah. But we're making out okay.
Yeah, you mentioned you're thinking creatively from a business.
Yeah, I mean, it is, as you know. I mean, everybody's adapting. And in our case, we had a pretty full slate of stuff for the fall and for the summer. And we've just pushed it back. I mean, we've luckily enough been able to push the graphic novels and stuff back to fall and winter to give you guys some breathing room because, again, and I think we're announcing today that any Diamond orders that were placed with humanoid stuff before the outbreak, we're not holding you to those, that because you don't know what, again, like I said, what you ordered just before the outbreak, you don't know what you're going to be able to sell on the other side. So why would I dump more product on you at this moment?
Well, as from retailer, thank you, much appreciated. From a publishing standpoint, what can retailers do for you? We have an active community. We get recommendations all the time, so we operate from that. But are you still getting support from retailers that you need right now?
Yeah, we really are, which is great. I mean, and we're not asking for it because they've got a lot on their plate, but still, people are we're very communicative. I mean, we were the first to come out when everything started falling out of the sky to say, listen, we're going to push things back. Don't worry about, dealing with us for the time being, do what you got to do. And everybody took that very well. And that, I think that earned us some good graces. But I mean, beyond that, in terms of what retailers can do for humanoids, just, get your customers to talk about this stuff word of mouth. I mean, the Incal by Mobius and Jordanowski is one of the greatest selling graphic novels of all time. And I'm surprised at how few people in America have read it, but it's Mobius. I mean, it's beautiful piece of work, and it's insanely influential on science fiction in the last 30 years. And the Metabaron stuff that springs out of that, again, hard science fiction, hard space opera. But we also do those life-drawn books. We do, I don't know if you saw The Twilight Man, which we did, which was the biography of Rod Serling. That's our life-drawn line. That's the stuff that is biographies or autobiographical stuff. And that has done really well for us. And it doesn't have to be science fiction. It doesn't have to be, space opera. It doesn't have to be the kind of things you normally associate with Humanoids and Metal Hurlong and magazines like that. So like I said, we've been really lucky. So we're spending this time as a publishing company. This is, by the way, this is the dullest conversation
not at all.
I've ever heard.
You're being watched by people who like the inside baseball of comic books.
Okay, this is very inside baseball because we should, I expect, we're not talking about history of the Marvel Universe right now. We're talking about how a publisher works. But
this is what I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, well, that's really it. It's just what we decided to do was, okay, we're not furloughing anybody. We're not making anybody drop their pencils. Instead, we're going to take this time to get caught up on everything so we're not reactive like everybody in business is all, you know this too. You always want to be proactive during the day, and there's always 14 things that fall out of the sky you got to deal with. So there's not much falling out of the sky right now. So let's not, once we stop being reactive, let's really think about what Humanoids 2.0 looks like on the other side of this and what we can do to publicize our work and what we can do to create better bonds with retailers and what we can do to make better bonds with the customers and let them know exactly what it is we're doing. There you go.
So how do you take your publisher hat off and put your writer hat back on? Is that
it's harder than I thought. I honestly thought it would be relatively easy to just say, okay, I'm taking the afternoon and I'm going to go write Ignited or whatever. But A, there's always stuff falling out of the sky. And B, I enjoy being publisher. I mean, I really enjoy the job, even with all that's going on. I have great people working for me and I like what we're doing. So it's not as, writing a script is not as much fun as, talking with your production guys about how to make comics better. I mean, every writer will, it's a cliche, but every writer will tell you this. It's, nobody likes writing. They like having written, right?
Yes.
They like when it's done. So I wish it were easier. I wish the transition were more seamless. Instead, I sort of stock up my time for Sunday and then just sort of do a deep dive there. Luckily at this moment, it's Ignited and there's another Doctor Strange script that will be due one day. Mm-hmm. But right now I'm transitioning to some other stuff that I'm doing on the side besides Humanoids and doing some other stuff for another publisher, which we can't announce yet, but I think you'll be happy. So again, for the time being, it's not that hard to make that transition because it's not like I have 5 books on the side.
Sure. But you mentioned History of the Marvel Universe earlier, and that seemed like not just a book, but an entire research project. What was your preparation like for that?
It was
every panel, like the annotations at the end were mind blowing. Can you tell me the research you did for that?
Yeah. Well, the good news is that I had Tom Brevoort, who knows more about Marvel Comics than even I do, as the editor. And I had the entire research team, which is the guys who put together the handbooks and so forth. And they know that minutia even better than I do. So the way it started was Tom called me up and said, 6-issue miniseries. I want to do the history of the Marvel Universe. You'd be a good guy. You interested? And I thought, sure. I mean, I haven't read the last 15 years of Marvel as closely as I used to when I was a kid, but I know all the stuff before then. How hard could this be? How hard?
Famous last words.
So Tom even sent me a page by page breakdown of here's like things you might want to cover in order, basically an order in which things happen, the things that we should probably hit. And of course that was a fungible document. We, added and subtracted to it as we went and would remember, oh Jesus, we haven't said anything about Black Widow yet, or we haven't even talked about Falcon and we're already up to Onslaught. So what are we going to do? Things like that happen. But really it was just me sitting down and going, okay, this seemed easy, but it's not just that I'm not as familiar with the last 20 years of Marvel Comics as I was the first 50 years. It's that in those 20 years, there has been so much retconning and so much continuity implanting of stuff that even the stuff that I thought I knew only scratched the surface. If you had waterboarded me, I wouldn't have been able to tell you all the stuff about the Eternals before this started. Now I am an expert. So thank you. So I've got a huge research library. Obviously, I've got the internet to go on, and then I also had the research team to backstop me. They did all the annotations in the back, and they were also there to backstop me every time I turned in a script to say, hey, this is out of order, or you forgot this, or you misspelled Adolf Hitler, which I did once, embarrassingly enough. So it made it easier, but I got to tell you, the further you get into Marvel history, I mean, I can do Spider-Man's origin in 200 words, like falling off a log. But when it came down to synopsizing Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars in like 400 words, that was literally a day and a half. That took me a day and a half just to write those 2 pages, just to figure out what had to go. I wouldn't have been able to do it without Javier Rodriguez. It wouldn't have looked even remotely as good. It wouldn't have read as well. His page design was great. If anybody hasn't seen it, it is just an amazing work of art. The storytelling there barely needs words on it to begin with, but he was phenomenal.
Well, and then his work on the Treasury Edition format.
Yeah, it looks so good, doesn't it?
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that format was brought back, and it worked so perfectly for the story that was told with History of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
It's
not, they call it Treasury Edition. I'm going to be nitpicky as an older guy and say, not exactly. It's somewhere in between, because I mean, in case Treasury Editions, for those of you who don't know, tabloid editions, we would also call them. Basically what they were twice the size of normal comics. Imagine taking a comic, go to the centerfold and then opening it up flat. So you're looking at those 2 pages. That's the size of a tabloid. That's how you got the tabloid pages. You wouldn't make that last fold as you were printing. So you'd have 1 page that was the size of 2 comics pages. This is not quite that, but it's still beautiful. It is still a beautiful format.
What was the weirdest little piece of trivia that had escaped your encyclopedic knowledge that you found out in the research of this comic series?
The relationship between Jean Grey and Phoenix is still a mystery to most of us. After all of this, is she? Isn't she? Is she? Isn't she? Is she? Isn't she? We go back and forth. I saw it go back and forth 6 times as I was doing my research. She was Phoenix. No, she wasn't Phoenix. No, she was. That was the most maddening thing. I wish I could think of the most insane little detail. That's a good question. Let's put a pin in that, and I'll come back to it if I think of something.
So right now you're also doing Doctor Strange, and you're doing some really cool stuff with it. And
Thanks.
it's one of my favorite runs. And Doctor Strange to me is one of those characters that doesn't have many good runs. Like you get Ditko's run, obviously,
Right. Yeah.
the Hart Brunner stuff.
Right. You get Stern, and you
get the Stern, like what's yeah. Yours is fantastic, and
thank you.
It's easy to push.
Thank you.
What was your approach coming with Doctor Strange on this?
It really was. I've never written a mystical character before. When they pitched it to me, I actually wasn't sure this is the way I wanted to go, because it's not. I'm a science boy. I minored in physics in college. I've always been a science geek. I have respect for myth and respect for what we call magic, but I don't really invest in it. So this is why I'm, more of a Superman guy than a Wonder Woman guy, more of a Iron Man guy than a Thor guy. So when Doctor Strange came up, that was interesting, because I never done that character, and really thinking about how magic works and how the cost of magic works, and just and having the idea. Well, again, once I had the idea immediately of let's take him into space, let's have him meet the Sorcerer Supremes of other planets. That made it interesting to me, because then you really could meld science and magic.
I know that I've heard writers in the past have said one of the difficulties of writing Doctor Strange is, what is the limit of his power?
I don't buy it for a second. You know what? I heard that argument. It's the same argument that people say I don't like Superman because he's too powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're not writing about his superpowers. You're writing about him as a person and the obstacles he faces. It's not. I admit that it's hard to come up with something that is really a physical challenge for Doctor Strange sometimes. But if you step back a little bit, you still remember that he's still got to gesture things. He's still got to speak things. He can't just stand there and not move and have him and the Hulk teleport around the world. He's got to do stuff. So it's, as long as you keep him busy, frankly, it's easier to, catch him upside the head. I never really wanted to go into the limits of magic, because I don't think that that's what comics is about. I think that comics is not about rules. Comics is about flying through the air.
Yeah, this comic should be bonkers.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, a superhero comic should be bonkers. It
Yeah.
should be something I can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
Speaking of, your Fantastic Four run was fantastic.
Thank you.
Reread it recently. It holds up.
Thank you.
And to me, again, that's one of those that there's really good Fantastic Four stories, and it feels like it's something hard to nail. But you and Mike nailed it.
Yeah, I couldn't have done it without Mike. I really couldn't have. It's Michael Ringo was the late Michael Ringo. God bless him. He's been gone almost 10 years now. But he was my partner in that, my creative partner, my artist, my buddy. And we meshed on that so well. We worked on Flash before then for a while, but we really meshed on FF. And to me, it wasn't that hard to get your hooks into. Tom Brevoort called me up and said, I want you to do Fantastic Four. This is like 2000, I guess it is. And I said, I'm back and forth. I'm ambivalent. And then I started thinking about, well, there's been a lot of great Thing stories, and there's been a lot of great Human Torch stories, and there's been some good Invisible Woman stuff. But nobody likes Reed Richards. Basically, not people don't hate Reed Richards. It's just if you took a poll of Marvel readers and got them to list their favorite characters, it'd be Thing, Wolverine, Spider-Man, and then everybody else. And Reed would be way at the bottom. And that was my goal. I said, okay, well, let's do something. Let's make people really love Reed. Let's go in there and really figure out what makes him tick and make him a little mad scientist-y, but also a good, solid family man, and a guy with a sense of humor, and a guy with a real sense of responsibility. And the idea that really kicked the whole thing off was that the reason that they call themselves the Fantastic Four, the reason they have a skyscraper apartment in the middle of Manhattan, the reason they have these colorful costumes, the reason they call themselves these colorful names, is because Reed realized, and this is something we did in our first issue, and it's not anything anybody had touched on before, is that Reed realized when he had the accident when he took these 4 people up into space, his 3 friends up into space, and they had this horrible accident that changed their lives. He'd ruined their lives. He destroyed them. They're going to be government projects for the rest of their lives. Johnny's going to be on fire. Ben's going to look like a giant monstrosity for the rest. He's ruined his friends' lives. So the only thing he can think to do to redeem himself and to make it better for them is to turn them into celebrities rather than let them wallow in misery. And that is a secret that he holds. Nobody on the team to this day knows that secret. It's just something that he, a cross he has to bear. And once we came up with that take on Reed, I really liked him. And from there, the rest of the team just came very easily. It was insanely easy to write. I can write Johnny and Ben dialogue back and forth all day long.
You again, that was one of my favorite parts. Was you just nailed that dynamic.
Thank you.
The Johnny thing dynamic.
Yeah, Johnny works best when he's impetuous. Johnny works best when he's not, 35 years old. Johnny works best when he's, reckless and impetuous and not the greatest grown up, because then you have them. Then that gives you the moments that you can suddenly have him be a grown up for an instance, and that catches everybody by surprise, and that's a good moment. And then he goes back to being an idiot.
Well, my favorite part of the run is when they storm heaven to get Ben.
Yep.
They meet God.
Yep.
And God is Jack Kirby.
What is in the Marvel universe? What would God be, but Jack? And he phoned his partner Stan, I believe, in the middle of that conversation with God, just to make sure that they weren't taking sides too heavily. But yeah, that was probably the most fun part of that entire run to write. It was hard because you wanted to get Jack's voice exactly right. But we sent Mike reference on his studio. We sent Mike reference on his drawing table. I mean, Mike, it wasn't just Jack. That was where Jack worked. That was, that's a drawing of Jack's studio.
I to this day, it remains one of my favorite sequences, one of my favorite comics. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
One thing I did want to talk to you about is working in a comic shop.
Yep.
And you've been around comic shops your entire life. One of the staples is, which character's better, who's stronger, what have you. I'm a Superman defender.
As you should be.
As I should be. You mentioned a little bit earlier, Superman's very important to me. The first convention I ever went to a panel where people tried to stump you with Superman trivia.
Okay. Yep. Good luck with that.
You were flawless. People were trying to stump you with kryptonite. They were trying to stump you with transformations from the 50s. Why your love of Superman? Why?
I've told this story before, so forgive me if you've heard this before. But when I was 15, this is not to cast aspersions on parents. Everybody was doing their best job. Everybody was doing the best they could possibly do. But I was caught in a broken home situation where I didn't really feel like either side knew what to do with me, or through no one's fault. I really, whether it's true or not, I felt very much like nobody cared about who I was. Nobody cared about me at all. And it was a very dark time. I'll be completely straight with you. It was a very, very, very dark time. And on January 26, 1979, I went to see Superman the movie. And I had loved Superman before I went in that movie, but I also loved magic tricks, and I loved, ping pong, and I loved a bunch of different things. I sat in the movie twice, and by the time I came out of that movie, I knew that whatever I was going to do with the rest of my life, it was going to have something to do with Superman. And I think that was because, and it took me years to figure this out, I think it was because, yes, he's a fictional character, and I understand that, and I've never gotten that confused with reality. But Superman cares about everybody. Doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, black or white, whatever your situation is, he cares about everybody. And in that moment, sitting there in the movie theater, I really felt like I made a connection, and that has stayed with me my entire life.
I have a 5-year-old son, and Superman is our guidepost with him. He loves Superman, but all lessons stem from Superman.
Cool.
He's kind. He's helpful. So,
yeah.
Again, I just wanted to hear someone smarter than me articulate the importance of that character.
Yeah. And Reeve got him to Reeve portrayed him better than anybody else ever will. I mean, Christopher Reeve nailed that character so beautifully. It just was so warm and compassionate without looking weak. And I tell you, one of my favorite moments in that movie is, again, he never tells a lie. He wants to be honest. And it's a little thing that most people miss. But remember when he catches Lois, he catches the helicopter, and she asks him, "Who are you?" And what does he say? He says, "A friend." And he's not just saying, "I'm a friend to you, I'm a friend to everybody," but he's saying flat out, "You know me, we've met. I'm a friend of yours." And then he goes off and flies off. So he's being completely honest in that moment.
That's fantastic. We're coming up to the end. One question I did want to ask you is, in your career, you have written many, many, many characters. Is there someone you're still itching to write that you haven't gotten to sink your teeth into yet?
I get that question a lot, actually, because there have been so many characters that I've written, to the point where now when I change assignments at Marvel, as we kind of do every couple of years to keep things fresh, the question is always, well, geez, who have I not written? I think Iron Man. I think I've got a take on Iron Man that is in my hip pocket that I might be able to do something with someday. But beyond that, it's a very slim list because I've been very fortunate and very lucky.
That said, is there anything that we didn't know? We put a pin in it. The secret history of the Marvel.
Right, the secret history of the Marvel universe.
Gotta have that payoff.
I wish I had a great answer for you here about some insanely tiny. But the thing is, to me, there's no such thing as Marvel trivia. It's all history. It's all important. Yep. And B, I kind of knew all the little nuances. So there wasn't really anything I picked up that surprised me. It was just more like, oh my God, how much Eternal stuff is there?
Well, let me try the question then. What is something that others might not know that would be well, did you know that they could whip out at a party?
Wow. If it's Marvel, that's tough. Superman's easy. I mean, like that stuff is falling off the log.
What's Superman stuff? Give me one of those.
All right, it's easy. I mean, what else, what would be cool? Because again, I've filled my head with so much stuff over the years. What are my favorite Superman stories? I'm going to go really deep baseball. I mean, really deep.
Do it.
What's Lana Lang's mother's maiden name? You actually, if you know Superman, you actually know this, but you don't know you know this.
Okay.
So Lana has an uncle. His name is Professor Potter. He was the crazy scientist who would come up with stuff all the time, right? Look at that face. You realize what's going on.
Immediately.
If his name is Potter, that's Mom's name. So she was Potter. That's one of my favorite super obscure Superman trivia questions.
That is fantastic. Well, Mark, we're at the end at 7:30. I promised I wouldn't keep you too late. Thank you so much. And from retailer to creator, if there's anything that we can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask.
And likewise, as far as Humanoids goes, anything you need, you've got the information to call, Harley or Pedro or anything you need. We'll help you out. And I am so glad for you that you've got a community as strong as you have and as supportive as you have to really help you through the tough times. I think that's terrific. And that speaks well of you and it speaks well of you and speaks well of the store that you've been able to build that. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. Our community is amazing and we don't know what we would do without them.